It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I wanted to do a little reaction discussion video with TwinsMainSage on their video discussing killer anxiety. Original video will be linked in the description. If you want to watch the full video, support the original creator for this fantastic video. But let's get into it. I've actually discussed killer anxiety in the past as well, and I'm going to link that at the end, but let's get into it. Yeah, I've actually discussed this topic before in the past, like I've said with DJ Lucid, and this is actually a thing that a lot of people do experience, as much as people that may disagree, or as much as people may try to shame other people for even experiencing any anxiety of even loading up the killer side. You know, that does happen, especially when you interact with this game very frequently. I think it sort of, you kind of build up a sort of this sort of negative like feeling of like trying to even load up the game in the first place, because of the idea that, you know, what, like, you kind of ask yourself, what is the point when you already kind of know the outcome, and you know, already don't find it very fun as it is. And it definitely ties to a lot of things, especially like when it comes to changes or the absolute like buffs that you've been seeing on the survivor end. Kind of makes it difficult for you to even want to load into matches, especially with the 5-minute games, the gen rushing, yada yada yada, pretty much to be expected within the game.
Because I thought that by merely asking to make a parody of his video, he might sue me or hate me. When there is conflict or a problem or any sort of tension, I assume the worst possible outcome, and the stress just builds upon itself until I become paralyzed with fear, and instead of doing anything productive or solving anything, I just doom scroll or watch Slimesicle videos. So as a killer in Dead by Daylight, what's the worst case scenario? What is the catastrophe that I'm planning for? What a big, scary word. It means to reduce someone to a lower position in one's own eyes or others' eyes. It comes with feelings of embarrassment and shame. A killer starts out in a position of power. They're the threat, the big bad, the final boss of the trial. So naturally, we react strongly when survivors are so obviously not afraid, dancing around you because they know they have nothing to fear, because there's...
Which, yeah, I do want to touch on the idea that you feel powerless when playing killer, and that is an idea that I've discussed in the past, and that's an idea that is still a prevalent problem. And that's exactly why I was saying that in that other video, that the game should be killer sided in order to make the killers more scary. Now, of course, the survivor mains will misconstrue that and think, oh, it just means you want the game to be easy. No, like, not at all. The game will still be difficult, especially against experienced survivor players. There are very good survivor players out there, and there are very good killer players out there as well, and they go head to head. We've seen this happen many times, and I've said this many times as well. The killers should be scary. The killers should be a threat, and with changes that make it not that a threat is kind of the biggest problem about it. And if you take into account the changes we've had recently, if we take into account the gen rush and the instantaneous healing speeds, like just the things that you kind of go up against, especially second chances and things like that, will just make you not want to really step into the shoes of the killer really as much, because if it's supposed to be sort of, as even Quiet Kills has described, like a power fantasy, where is the power fantasy when you're just going to see all of those things happen, right? You don't feel powerful, you know, in that sense. You don't necessarily have, it doesn't necessarily have to be an easy game, but at least if you feel strong, like you feel like you're doing something, you know, that's mainly the feeling we're trying to discuss here. And TwinsMainSage breaks it down perfectly. They're not afraid of me, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's insane.
There's nothing you can do to stop them. That's the sort of thinking and spiraling that we can get stuck in during a bad game. Survivors that play well or aggressively are not cursing your name, though you might assume the worst because of the popularity of some of my least favorite DBD content in the YouTube space. Content that mocks newer killers, and content about toxic streamers. There is a non-zero chance that if you play poorly enough, and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, then your gameplay will be shown publicly for a bunch of people on TikTok.
This is another important thing that I think is been seen before. I think this is something that we see constantly in the DVD community, and I even post content like this as well, because it happens, right? And mainly because like I don't really play Survivor, so I can't say like it would be that sort of perspective, but you know, we've all gone against our fair share of TTV streamers that are incredibly toxic, that get incredibly angry, and then you use that to make a video about it, right? Because it's funny. But on the other hand, I think this right here, what TwinsMainSage is talking about, I think is a very Survivor-focused problem, because of the fact that there's a lot of killers that probably don't really know what they're doing, and any Survivor video you can look at will constantly have that sort of narrative that the killer's got like is missing swings and stuff like that. You're making fun of them. You're putting out the sound effects and stuff like that. You know, with all the and the editing is like very fast paced and things like that. It's very brain rot. You already know that. We've seen this plenty of times. We've seen it plenty of times, and I wasn't really interested in that sort of content when I would watch videos and stuff like that. I just don't think it's very accurate to the actual game, and I also don't think that it is a good thing to kind of create this narrative that like the person you're up against is terrible and we should make fun of them. You know what I mean? Like if they're bad, right? Like that's fine. But at the end of the day, like they need to improve, and you just move on to your next game. Let them learn. You know what I mean? And this also ties into the other thing that I was saying, which was the whole mercy concept, right? Like when survivors play badly, they're begging for mercy, and as a killer, you're expected to bend the knee, right? Give them mercy and stuff like that. But then when a killer plays badly, you don't ever see survivors giving them any hooks, or not healing, or not doing the gens, just so that they have a chance to keep up. And they usually just steamroll them out the game, and then teabag at the exit gate, and then in the end game chat, it's just a bunch of trash talk, right? And so these people that maybe aren't really that experienced with the killer would then have to experience that, and probably then develop this quote, you know, killer anxiety, where they're like, I don't want to have to get, you know, experience that again, because that's not fun. And then of course then leads to pushing more people away from playing the killer side.
Or YouTube to point at and laugh. This is a catastrophe. This is the worst possible scenario. That paired with the seemingly endless amount of videos about toxic TTVs that are more often than not survivors, it means that the DVD player base, a lot of the killers, are being shown that mistakes are not treated as mistakes, but as spectacles, and that survivor players are heartless and toxic by nature. That is the rule, not the exception. But this is an incorrect assumption, fueled by the fact that the YouTube algorithm pushes negative, repetitive content way more than positive content. So much of these videos is what causes arguments that fuel the tribalism in this game, the killers versus survivors. That's not what this game is. The majority of DVD players play both sides. The majority of DVD players are literally just playing this game as an escape from the real world and to have fun with friends. It's so easy to lose that when you're lost in these cesspools of negativity and toxicity, so crushed by the weight of the expectation of the killer being able to be scary and be in control, being pitted against an unpredictable survivor team whose capabilities are unknown, ranging from casual solo queue gamers to a swift playing competitively, and everything in between. These don't mix well, so anxious killers tend to assume the worst when mentally preparing for their next games. I've often seen people make snap judgments about the survivor team they're about to face, saying they're a swift, a bully squad, definitively. Meanwhile, in my personal experience, I don't see any way to know that for sure. This is unfortunately fueled by the echo chamber.
I will say though, when you play the game, I will sort of disagree. When you do play the game enough, you're kind of able to kind of tell. You know, you can kind of feel it out, I think, in my opinion. Like, you know, it really depends on, and it's kind of crazy to say, but the example even used in the video when talking about the solo queues versus the swifts, believe it or not, even cosmetics may give it away, right? Like sometimes you'll have matching cosmetics between teams and stuff like that, matching names. You'll also, you can definitely, depending if they're using more default skins, kind of like this Elodie here, or this Funk Min, you might think, okay, maybe they're solo queue, they're probably, you know, like, especially like the defaults or like the prestige outfits in a team, you go, okay, that's probably solo queue. But if they have like skins and stuff like that, or even combinations, you go, yeah, these guys are probably more experienced overall. Now that is sort of a educated guess. It is not foolproof, given like, you know, like a little symbol next to their name or anything to be able to know, but it does at least give you a hint. All right, and I can kind of see the idea now. Obviously, this is still just theory, and this is not really like, you know, ultimately something we can base in off of that, but it's just from, you know, anecdotal experience and just kind of going off of that alone. So we'll take it with a grain of salt, obviously, but let's continue.
Experience, I don't see any way to know that for sure. This is unfortunately fueled by the echo chambers located within the DBD community, where anxious killers share their stories and reinforce the fears of other killers. There are content creators that feed upon this fear by creating videos about obliterating a group of allegedly toxic survivors, and these anxious killers consume and internalize this content, leading to the spread of terms like bully squads and second chance perks as a way to cope with loss, taking out their anxiety and frustrations on the survivors, since shifting the blame is easier than dealing with the overwhelming amount of...
I understand it, you know what I mean? I understand it, but I wouldn't say that bully squads or second chance perks don't exist. As we've even discussed many a times in videos like that, second chance perks consist of stuff like decisive strike and dead hard and off the record, which you know, this term is used to talk about those perks giving you a second chance before going down. Like, that's ultimately what it is. And there's many perks that cover this sort of second chance idea. You could even say deliverance, right? All of them that are giving advantages for ultimately not really giving much to achieve that sort of perk to activate. Now, bully squads is very easy to point out, obviously. If you are seeing a team that are like multiple people that are trying to either head on you, maybe sabotage the hooks and stuff like that, these are just common things. Like these terms are accurate to describe what they are, right? Like a bully squad is a four-man team with communication to try to give the killer a hard time by either sabotaging hooks or trying to use boil over, you know, on high ground and stuff like that, so you can constantly keep wiggling free. You know, whatever have you. Like there are different variations of it, but I wouldn't say that these are just terms that were created because of the narrative, but I would say that these are terms that accurately reflect, you know, what people are going up against, at least from my perspective. But that's just me.
Perks as a way to cope with loss, taking out their anxiety and frustrations on the survivors, since shifting the blame is easier than dealing with the overwhelming amount of the constraint of circumstance. In any competitive game, there is pressure on everyone to perform well, but it is very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of things a killer is carrying on their shoulders. You need to protect 5 gens, hook survivors 3 times each, hopefully get value out of your perks unless they're completely countered by RNG or the survivor team. And also, you're running out of time, and every long chase, every stun, every time you lose a survivor, you're reminded in that quiet that you are wasting time. When you lay it out like that, it might make someone never want to play killer again, huh? But that's the game working against you. So let's talk about you working against you. I asked my community to tell me about their experiences with killer anxiety, and there was a common theme to a lot of the responses I got. First of all, I want to hug you all and tell you that it's going to be okay. Secondly, there seems to be a notable fear of messing up, of not being good enough, of being so close to winning and failing due to your own shortcomings. I've seen this a lot coming from people whose killer main is wrapped up into their identity. I'm a Twins main. It's what my channel is entirely themed around. I have all their cosmetics, I prestige them up to P100, so it feels embarrassing to lose as twins, or to miss a pounce with Victor. When you're known as that guy that plays that killer, there's an added layer of pressure to be good at that character. I want to be the person my friends go to when they have questions about the twins. I want survivors to be scared of how good I am as twins. So when I fail, who is at fault? Alright, who Who is there to blame for the game that you just lost? Who is responsible for this terrible feeling that you're experiencing? Well, the answers that are easiest to see are the survivors and the balancing of the game as a whole. The survivor perks were too strong. They were a Swift, so they had an advantage with communication. They were trying to make you miserable and get in your head. Or the killer you're playing is weak, or was nerfed, or the perks you usually run were nerfed. These are digestible reasons for failure, and I wouldn't have a problem with them if they didn't push so much anger and bitterness out into the community.
Now, I do completely agree with all those points. Like, these are all factors that fall into the killer experience. Like, there's a lot of perks that we're using. One of my favorites actually was machine learning. That had gotten nerfed, and I just didn't understand as to why, right? And basically, for me using the perk for as long as I did, I think I kind of understood by the timing of how to use the perk. So I figured, judging by the duration, I had at least 3 M1s I could get, or 4, before it would run out, or I could get maybe 1 down and maybe another hit within the time frame. But with the reduced amount of time, that affected my pressure overall. I wasn't able to utilize, it as much because it was lowered to 45 seconds. So therefore, I had to go, well, now I can't go for 2 downs. I can only go for the 1, and then I'm going to have to hook, because if I try to go for someone else, it'll run out by the time I even reach them. So I have to then just completely shift the way I play as a result. And that had actually affected my experience with that. I wasn't really a fan of it. So I understand point number 5. Point number 1, yeah, no, this is also something that I think also kind of plays into a lot of things as well. That's actually very true. There are a lot of very strong perks that survivors do have, and there's a lot of the time, it really will give them that advantage they need. I've had plenty of matches where a perk really could just make the difference. Even recently, like on stream, we actually had a match where everybody got downed because I played as well as I could have, and next thing you know, somebody had Unbreakable. Completely shifts the game right over. I still won, but obviously now it took much longer to actually complete the game because of it. Survivors are Swift, of course. Swift is one of the strongest forms of survivor teams in the game, so that makes complete sense. Bully Squad is for point number 3, so if you ever go against a team that's deliberately trying to do that, that makes sense. And your killer being weak, that also does apply. Like, these things are all very true in their own ways. Now, the one thing that I don't know if TwinsMainSage is going to mention in this video, but is the idea that sometimes it also means that as a killer player, you probably didn't play as well as you thought you did. And what I recommend doing is recording your games if you can, and watch them over, kind of see, what mistakes you were making. Maybe there was like pressure that you kind of missed out on, or maybe you played a bit too fairly and you needed to get somebody out of the game sooner rather than later. And there's a lot of nuance when it comes to that. Now, if you do want to submit your games, to get reviewed, join the Discord. I have a channel for coaching, clips, and video and stuff like that. You can submit it there. Include your hours as well. You can put it there, and then I can actually make a video. And I do also have a playlist on the channel covering the match reviews as well, if you want to be able to learn a little bit more on how to play killer better.
Reasons for failure, and I wouldn't have a problem with them if they didn't push so much anger and bitterness out into the community. Call me an optimist, but I choose to believe that the survivor teams that I face do not take joy in making me miserable. That my loss can be seen as being beaten by a team that was better than me, and thus it wouldn't make sense if I won. Winning would mean that I'd likely go against more teams that are factually more skilled than I am at this game. And as for the second reason, I'm going to use some tough love here. You cannot choose to play a killer that struggles in a competitive setting and then get mad at that killer for struggling in a competitive setting. Killer mains that play Myers, Ghostface, Trapper need to have lower expectations than those who play Nurse or Artist.
Damn, I got called out. Damn. It's so true though. If you're picking low tier, you have to just assume that you're going to lose your games. Which is a sad sort of reality when it comes to this game. And I do wish that more killers were more like closer in terms of strengths, that people who enjoy their characters can still enjoy their characters and not feel incentivized to specifically just play Nurse, Blight, and Kennedy. Like, And that sucks, you know, like that really sucks overall for everybody, because I'm pretty sure they want to go against different characters, and I'm pretty sure killer players either want to play their own main that they actually like, or they're just not going to load up the game or whatever they do, you know. It's a damn shame.
There is a power disparity between killer powers. A Blight will, on average, win more than a stealth killer. That doesn't mean your killer can't be a threat. That doesn't mean you can't win. So we've talked about all of these big topics. Let's put them together. I'm going to tell you about my experience with killer anxiety. When I was a newer player, I didn't play killer for the first 100 hours of playtime. I was terrified of the pressure that killers were under, and I didn't want to be humiliated. It only took...
I've actually heard this narrative before when I was talking to people who were just starting the game, like within a few hours, like starting the game. I actually had done some coaching for them and stuff like that. And they inevitably became more focused on Survivor because it was way less pressure. It was way easier, which I've mentioned this point before in other videos. It was way easier than playing killer. Ultimately, because you're not the sole focus of the match. You're not the main driving force, being a threat to everything and having so much pressure on your shoulders to actually perform well and to actually kill everybody. You can just walk around the map, look at the sky, touch the gen if you feel like, and pretty much just have a normal casual game, compared to killer where you're kind of like, all right, if my job is to kill and I gotta kill, then it's gonna be a little bit hard, you know. And I've said this before, Survivor is the easier side of the two to play. I've said this plenty of times. And once again, we see this point pop up again, just further proving my point that, you know, it is the tougher side to get into.
Facing my fears and actually going through with learning killer to, at the very least, lessen the killer anxiety that was plaguing me. Now that I've been playing for 4 years, with thousands of hours, those feelings of stress and self-doubt aren't gone, but I've learned better ways to deal with them. Unfortunately, I say that, but literally yesterday, from when I'm writing this, I let my ego get the best of me, and after losing a trapper game, I switched to a strong twins build and took my anger out on the next team. This was a bad idea. I didn't get any pleasure out of ruining the trial experience for these survivors and going for a snowball so early in the game.
I think that's the biggest issue, I think, with the DBD narratives that people are creating. TwinsMainSage, all due respect, you know what I'm saying? Fantastic creator, absolutely want to point that out. But starting off by saying like that the survivors were victims to your sort of playstyle, I think is really just not necessarily what we should be trying to sort of promote, I guess I would say, because then it further adds on to this sort of victim narrative that the survivors are just unable to handle or counter what you're doing. Like if you're going against players that are skilled or that are able to counter these things, it's pretty much just a competitive game at that point. And even if they weren't, I mean, I'm pretty sure they'll just move on to their next game and not really worry about it. And I don't really believe that we should be framing it in the way that, oh, they didn't like what they were going up against. You know what I mean? Like it, I don't think that that's a really a way to frame it, because that's ultimately not the reason, right? Like, you know, as I've said many times, this also goes into the opposite, right? Like there's people that probably don't enjoy the whimsy or the farming or the whatever have you in games too, and not find it interesting. And it goes both ways. It's ultimately a spectrum. So I don't really agree with the idea that, you know, they really were victims in this situation, you know. Ultimately, like I've said many times, you know, you can play however you want, you know, and I've said also as well, like survivors also engage in gameplay that is not fun to go up against. It is not necessarily healthy for the game and other things like that, but nobody bats an eye. But for some reason, when it comes down to killer playstyle, for some reason it's just constantly frowned upon to just play the game. So that is something I will say I fundamentally disagree with.
Pleasure out of ruining the trial experience for these survivors and going for a snowball so early in the game. I felt hollow. I felt embarrassed that with all of the messages of kindness and whimsy in my videos, I was still doing the wrong thing. But
that I disagree with. Adding morality to just playing a video game is probably the biggest issue that DBD has as a whole. It's like, we have to keep in mind here and remember that this is still a video game, all right? And playing how you want should not be based around morality, right? Now, obviously, the intent in itself, you can say, is the issue, right? Like, as written on the screen, taking my anger out on people that did nothing wrong is the wrong thing. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the way you played was bad, or that doesn't necessarily mean that the, you know, like the killer choice or anything like that was a bad thing, right? And how you decide to feel after engaging in something like this is also perfectly normal for you as well. But we need to sort of point out the idea that how we handle our frustration with the game like this is obviously something that we should all focus on, and trying to sort of lay it out in a way that is healthy for the person by person. But the thing is that this sort of narrative kind of ties into the idea that a lot of survivor mains are used a lot to try to, you know, shame killers as, oh, you're playing strategically, and that's a problem. Like, you're a villain now, you're a bad person for just playing a video game competitively, or just trying to win your game to feel a bit better about your situation or whatever have you. So while I agree with the narrative and the intent behind it, like, that is not a good thing, we don't want to frame it as, like, you know, a similar sort of playstyle or a similar sort of game where, say you do main twins, but and you do just like to win your games. That shouldn't be like a bad moral thing. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest problem with the DBD community as a whole, is like, it's for some reason is morality behind using your controller or using your keyboard and mouse. Like, we're playing a video game. Like, it's not that serious. You know what I mean? Like, I've made this comparison before as well. Like, we've seen this even with like fighting games, or even like shooting games or anything like that. Like, nobody ever goes around and says, oh, you know, you're a bad person for shooting that one operator. It's like, what? Like, we're playing team deathmatch. Like, I'm pretty sure we're just trying to go get our points up. Doesn't matter who they are, you know? But yeah.
That's the unfortunate part about killer anxiety. There isn't a clear path to overcome it. You can acknowledge it, you can deal with it, and it will get easier to handle. But you'll still have bad games, and you'll still have that hesitation the next day where you wonder, is it worth it to play at all? And to answer, I think it is. I love this game. I know why I love this game. I think the negative feelings are always outweighed by the sheer amount of joy that this game gives me. I love Survivor and Killer players alike. I love the human moments and the close games. And I've gotten a lot better at knowing when the stress is getting to be too much and I need to go do something else. Anxiety is not a product of my environment, it's a product of my brain. Everything could go your way in a Killer trial, and you still might be plagued by what-ifs for the next one. We all have our own reasons for this stress, be it a need to win, a fear of failure, competitiveness. I know that my games are made better by treating survivors as human beings, by being open to friendly interactions and going easier on them when they're struggling. I like playing empathetically. If your reaction to me expressing empathy for survivors is to tell me about all the survivors that have wronged you, then you're missing the point. If you can find nothing you like about facing your opponents, if you can't think of a single interaction with another person that you enjoyed, then you should not be playing this game. There needs to be something that you enjoy that brings you back beyond bathing in the blood of your enemies. And this game functionally could not exist without killers and survivors alike. There does not need to be so much animosity between them.
I would say I fundamentally disagree with that sort of concept that you should not be playing the game unless you want whimsy, you know what I mean? And, you know, as much as I understand the point, you know what I mean, as somebody like myself, I mainly play to be those characters that I like, right? Like, for example, like, especially when it comes to the slashers and things like that, like I've said, like, this is one of the only games you can actually do that. So, like, in my, like, perspective, like, I like to sort of step into the shoes of those characters and kind of play as those characters, because that's what's fun to me. But when it comes down to just, like, you know, not like, to be like, oh, you shouldn't be playing this game if you don't like the whimsy, essentially. I kind of disagree with that. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people come for the game for different reasons, and from my perspective, like, I've come in for the licenses, like, for Ghostface, for Freddy, for Myers, like, things like that, for Chucky even, you know, and to be able to play those characters, because no other game offers that at all. And
It could not exist without killer.
but I will say I completely agree with the other points that TwinsMainSage is saying, though. Obviously, like, you need, you know, one side does not exist without the other. Makes complete sense. And I understand the idea that you do not want to continue to hold up the us versus them mentality, and I do think that it requires both sides to kind of see that, and I completely understand that as well. And I am making that point as well. I think that it should be equal on both sides in the sense that mercy can be given. It should be within the DVD culture to give mercy to both sides. You know, as much as they expect the killers to give mercy, give the lower skilled killers some help too. Like, they also can receive that as well, and maybe they'll be inclined to offer that mercy to another team, and then that team may offer to somebody else. So you create a chain reaction of people giving mercy to everybody else and create a new culture. Like, you know what I mean? Focus more on that, because at the end of the day, it really just takes, like, you know, the right voices, the right people to say it, the right amount of people doing it, you know what I mean? And not making it an entitled mess, not making it about, oh, because I'm doing bad now I should get a free handhold win. Like, no, that's not how that works. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if it's promoted enough and it's at least like a mutual respect on both ends, then I can be like, fine. But like, we do not need entitlement included with this. But I do disagree with TwinsMainSage on that point, though. Like, whatever brings you back to the game is what brings you back to the game, and if that's what you find enjoyable, whatever it is, you know, keep doing it, obviously. But I would disagree, though, that you shouldn't just like not play the game because you can't find like one whimsical interaction like that you had that will bring you back to the game. Because like, for me personally, like, I'd never engage with it because that's just not how I view the game, and that's not what I'm really worried about. You know, me personally, I just enjoy the characters I play as, and I like the licenses that they come from. So, you know, kind of stepping into those shoes, you know, I think is more interesting to me than anything else. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, subscribe to all the YouTube things. Check out the original video linked in the description for TwinsMainSage. Fantastic creator, dropping wonderful content, especially very positive content that we really need within the community, because we already know that it is a lot. It is definitely a lot to deal with, you know, with all this type of stuff. So that being said, man, check out the original video, check out my other videos, hit that like, sub, support the channel with the links in the description, follow on Twitch, all the other things. I'll see you guys in the next video.